George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. June is Black Music Month, and so we thought we would take a little slither of one aspect of Black music, which is hip hop music. Yes, hip hop music is Black music,
Yes, it
despite what
is.
everybody. Let's talk about that because there's a lot of conversation about who did what. Well,
Oh, wow.
Dr. James Peterson is here. He is a hip hop scholar and he's a host on WRD Radio, right?
In
That's in
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. And he's here. We first met. What was your book called?
Well, which one?
The first one I think you wrote.
So my first book is called The Hip Hop Underground and African American Culture. My second book is a book that's called In Media Race, like race, gender, and popular culture. The third book might have been when we met. That's called Hip Hop Headphones, Scholars a Critical Notebook. And my last book is a book called Prison Industrial Complex for Beginners.
There you go. So
I got a few books.
So let's talk about, so June, we celebrate Black Music Month, Juneteenth,
right.
all of the good stuff. So a lot's been going on in the world of hip hop. And so I said hip hop is Black music, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of other folks have been saying a whole lot of things. So what are you saying?
Well, so there's no question that it's Black music. There's actually also no question that it is predominantly Black American music, but there are some caveats.
Go ahead.
Kilpatrick, some caveats. So the first caveat is that you would not have hip hop culture without Kool Herc and without Grandmaster Flash and without our Caribbean brothers and sisters who brought a certain diasporic element to the music and to the culture. You know, Kool Herc, who's one of the founding figures of the culture, brought elements from Kingston, Jamaica, essentially like the kind of yard music, yard culture from Jamaica. Obviously, Bob Marley's influence and reggae's music influence is there. Obviously, also, you know, this sort of, and this is where it gets complicated, but the ways in which our Caribbean brothers and sisters received the music of figures like James Brown and Parliament and Funkadelic, they repurposed it a little bit, sampled it out a little bit, and brought it back into the origins of hip hop culture. So it's a diasporic phenomenon that Black Americans spearheaded. Now.
Wait, hold on a second. Can I just cut in real quick?
Yeah.
So when I said Black music, you immediately went to Black American, right? So I thought Black was Black. So why are we splitting it? Why are we talking it like that? I think that's important to say something about that.
And I don't want to, in general, I don't want to split those hairs because I want Black to be as expansive and inclusive and as authentic as it can be.
Right.
But it's hard to argue with the African American experience as the foundation of what hip hop culture was and still what it is today, by the way.
Right.
But we got to acknowledge our Caribbean influences. We have to acknowledge our Puerto Rican and Latinx brothers and sisters who also were part of that founding. And we have to acknowledge a lot of the youth in the city of New York City at that time. And so it really is it's a team effort. But there's no way you can't identify hip hop as Black music. One way or another, it is Black music.
One way or the other, right? All right, so we got that. So where we are now, so I was listening, I was watching the Shaka Khan Tiny Desk concert the other day. Incredible. And it was just like, wow, word, you know, and all of that whole series with Tiny Desk, where they have everybody, right? You know, who was it? When I saw Mystical on there, I was like, okay, y'all are just gonna do, and that was, you know, and they've had everybody in between. So when you think about what's, you know, she's 71 in the game and in the game for many years. Where are we with hip hop and Black music? We had a couple of beefs. I know you want to weigh in on some of that too. So where we at now, right now?
I mean, hip hop culture is still one of the dominant forms of popular culture in this country and around the world, along with country music, along with Afro beats, which is emergent on the global stage as well. It's still in that top two, one, two, three. Hip hop is still right there. It's still popular music. It still drives trends. It drives and informs culture. It still makes the headlines. It still dominates the charts. If you would have told me back in 1979 that hip hop culture in 2024 would be where it is right now, I would not have believed you, given its expansion and its global reach and its tentacles throughout every nation and every piece of culture around the world. So it is a big thing. It is what it is. I think when we start to think about hip hop here at home and look at kind of what are our directives as denizens of the culture, I think there are a couple of things. Number one, I think we have to continue as a culture to push back against the materialism and the misogyny and the different pathological elements of the culture that the market drives. And so if you think about drill music, for example, where you have artists literally rapping about crimes they've committed in some cases, those are the kind of things that we should try to stamp out and push back against, not to censor them, but to give people the tools to be able to understand what that music is and how it emphasizes some of the darker elements or more negative elements of the culture. I also think that we have to embrace and find ways to center and recenter women in the culture. And so I know there are a lot of real popular women artists like Ice Spice that draw a lot of attention, or Megan Thee Stallion draw a lot of attention. Those are great artists, sex positive artists, important, but I always challenge folks to listen to Rhapsody and to Nitty Scott and to other Black women who are engaged in the culture and making music that gives you a broader spectrum of representation of how and when Black women enter into the music and into the culture. And so we got to be responsible citizens of the culture, I think, in the 21st century. We have to be responsible listeners, critical listeners, and responsible citizens and aficionados of the culture.
Dr. James Peterson, Brother Peterson, we say that, but you know what? I really think we like the ratchetness, right? And I say that, unfortunately, because there's always this call for the higher, for what you just said. What about Rhapsody? What about, some of these other artists? Yeah. Let's give them shine. And there's nothing wrong with what the other folks are doing. And yet, that's what is there is, what am I trying to say?
Well, Brother
we yeah, you know what I'm saying? We say we want one thing.
I understand what you're saying.
Right. We aspire to one thing, but what we really want is the other thing. So aren't we being hypocritical in our own analogy of what we want? Right.
Well, no, I mean, for a long time, hip hop culture was youth culture, and at its foundation and in its origins, it was party music. And it will always have that element.
Right.
We can judge young people for wanting to listen to quote unquote ratchet music at a party.
Yeah, and I'm not judging it. I'm just
I know. I mean, I'm not talking about you. Other people will judge that, right?
Right.
But I mean, I remember Bessie Smith. I've listened to Bessie Smith records, right? I've listened to raunchy music in other genres. And
oh my God. What's her name? Millie Jackson?
Millie Jackson. Bro. I mean, I don't think that sex positivism is the problem. I think that sexism is the problem.
All right, go ahead. Say more.
The problem isn't women talking about sexuality and sex appeal. The problem is the ways in which patriarchy and misogyny and what some folks refer to as misogynoir impact the lives of women and young girls in our community. And those issues have to be addressed regardless. We have our rates of domestic violence are ridiculous, right? Our rates of sexual assault are ridiculous, right? Like those are issues, those are social issues that we have to address to scapegoat the music for that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so the music is party music in some ways, not what I listen to, and not so much maybe what you listen to. I'm listening to the music for substance and for critique and for critical engagement with the political and social issues of the world that we live in. But there are young people who listen to the music, just want to dance to it. And it has to be able to be all those things for all those people. I think it can be that, but if you're asking me, is it hypocritical? No. It was always, the first hip hop was a hip hop jam, right? The first iterations of it is as party music. Now, it was very quickly, even early on, directed at the purposes of reclaiming spaces and of talking about environments and of thinking through critical political issues. So you also have to remember that historically, the music was already there. The message is what, 1982? Was it
Yeah,
1983?
81, 82. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the message, bro.
right, right.
Right? Broken glass everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right? So
People on this and just don't care.
just don't care, right? That's the very beginning of the culture. And so 50 plus years out, we can't forget those historical origins. Yes, there was parties, there's also social commentary.
Yeah. Dr. James Peterson, hip hop scholar. So in the culture, right, we had some seminal moments. Let me not bury the lead Diddy and what is going on with him.
Yeah.
And the tape and what that means right now in this moment in hip hop. And let's from the standpoint of the issue of sexual assault, domestic violence.
But we have zero tolerance for sexual assault, domestic violence. Really, for me, zero tolerance for violence, period. The release of that video, and I think people will be able to know this about me anyway, that I've never really been a big fan of that kind of music necessarily. So I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just saying that the release of the video suggests for me that we have to implement that zero tolerance policy accordingly, even for P. Diddy. And there are other folks coming out, and people can read the newspaper clippings about those things. Violence against women is a problem around the world. I'm not going to scapegoat hip hop for that. It's a problem around the world. It's a problem in America. It's a problem in the Black community.
And let me
we
just
have to be vigilant about rooting that out of our community.
Before you go further, I just want to say, just for people that don't know, Sean P. Diddy Combs had settled out of court with someone he was dating, Cassie, right?
Yep.
And then he had denied it for all of these years, and then the video was released showing him basically dragging her, kicking her, and that's what we saw on tape, right? We don't know what happened.
Awful. And that video suggests to me that is a pattern of behavior, and reminds us that we have to have a zero tolerance policy for that level of violence within our own community, outside of our community, in the culture, in where we live, in the States. And here's the thing too, just so y'all can understand this. It's not just about, it is about the moral piece of it, right? But it is also about the social, cultural, economic, familial, community. It's all those other things too, all the things that fall under that. That's not the world we want to live in. You don't want anybody in your life or your family treated that way. And by extension, you should not want anybody to be treated that way.
And you started to talk about that within the African American community, and you kind of extended it, but I wanted to go specifically to the point you were trying to make there.
So domestic violence is a really big problem in the African American community. You all can look up the data on this, but Black women are being harmed, assaulted, and sometimes murdered at rates exponentially greater than their white counterparts, largely by domestic partners. And so there are some issues that we've got to address as a community, very specific to that issue. And it's less honestly about Puffy and more about all the hundreds, if not thousands, of women whose names we don't know. And so use this moment. You can talk and tweet and say whatever you want to say about Puffy, cancel him, talk about whatever, but don't do that without acknowledging that this is an actual issue in our community where there are women suffering every day under those kinds of violent conditions. And we got to be able to address and redress that, especially as men. We got to be able to address and redress that.
You know, I'm thinking about that, right? That piece that you just said, because we started talking about hip hop, and then we talked about one of the figures in hip hop, right? So let's connect the dots, right? Because a lot of people, you know, Chris Brown and others within the hip hop, is Chris Brown hip hop or pop? Whatever you want
I
to
would
call it.
say
Right?
no. I would say Chris Brown is R&B and pop, but that doesn't, that he's still still connected to this, because when you see those icons
Right.
engaged in that behavior, please know that they represent hundreds, if not thousands, of men who engage in that behavior. And so we have to think about it. Let's use the opportunity to think about how we do the real work of changing those things. And how do we change the behavior of men in our community?
Well, let me. So this is taking a turn I didn't expect. So I'm just going to go with it. You know how we do, right? And because this is obviously work that I'm deeply embedded in. All right. So power. I like power. You like power. Do you like power? Let me
I
start
am
with
not
that.
a fan of power, and
Not a
I've not
fan of power.
watched it.
Okay.
I've had a lot of people ask me to watch it and say you got to
You
watch.
hated it. So power, as you know, a brand that was executive produced by
Huge brand.
right, huge brand, Courtney Kemp, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, right? And the spinoff of the series is called Power Book 2 Ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're going to say power is part of the hip hop lexicon, if you will, but you're not feeling it like that.
Well, I mean,
Because there's a
again,
point, I'm getting to a point here.
you are, but and I want to be clear, Brother Kilpatrick. So like, I've never really been a fan of like Puffy, never been a fan really of R. Kelly. I liked 50 Cent's first album, but wasn't really a fan of his music or how he enters into the culture, right? And so
Right.
I don't follow that stuff as much, and I don't consume that stuff as much. Now, if you want to talk about Snowfall, I talk about Snowfall all day with you.
Which
But
I really haven't seen.
right, but let me tell you something. If you watch Snowfall and see how Black women show up in Snowfall versus how Black women show up in Power, you probably could better understand why I'm watching Snowfall and why I'm not watching Power.
Okay. So Michael Rainey Jr., who is the star of the spinoff series, who everybody hated in the Power series, but then somehow geniusly, right, they made him the star. It was like, how are they going to make a show about somebody that everybody hates? And they pulled it off. And they're ending it this season. So he's on a podcast the other day, and a woman grabs his privates on the live stream, right?
Yeah.
So he goes on to say, listen, I'm still trying to process this. Sexual assault is not okay, right?
Yeah.
The response that people, yo, you a man, you know, appreciate
toxic
it.
masculinity. This is toxic masculinity right here.
Okay. So let's connect. So is that one of the, how do we get that out of the culture? Because people are basically saying, man, even 50 Cent goes on to say he's not going to press charges, but basically trying to not let it be anything. You should be honored that the sister came up to you and grabbed your nuts. And it's happened to other people. In other words, we forget that, I don't know. Because if he had done that.
I'll put it to you this way.
Right.
We don't yet have the language for how to talk about Black heterosexual men being assaulted or Black heterosexual men being made to feel uncomfortable in certain situations, right? We don't have that language, and that's a challenge. But on the order of challenges that we have to wrestle with, and I'm not agreeing with the people in the comments who came against Michael Rainey. I'm just saying on the order of challenges that we have to wrestle with, that does not rise to the level of the challenge of, for example, domestic violence of Black men committed against Black women, right? So I think if we do the good work as men of addressing the challenges of patriarchy, misogyny, and other issues that are coming from us and from our brothers and from our fathers and from our friends, I think we'll find the language that we need and find the space to be able to talk about how in certain situations we're also made to feel uncomfortable.
So, like in hip hop, do we want to do that? Do we really want to do that? Right? Because there's so many opportunities that have passed. Again, and the reason why I brought up Michael Rainey Jr. not to elevate a man getting assaulted, and we should be all outraged by that. It's the fact that both men and women were dismissing it as just there ain't no big deal, right?
Yeah, and again,
But
I think you have to think, instead of thinking about Michael Rainey Jr., think about Black boys in
right,
those situations, right?
right,
Think about Terry Crews and what Terry Crews has gone
right,
through.
right.
Just
When
for
right,
he talked about being groped by a white male executive, and
right.
50 Cent is one of the people that clowned him for that, right? And so we haven't arrived at a space where we've developed a language for that, Brother Kilpatrick. But what I will say is that if we do the work we're supposed to do on our end about the violence and the assault and all the things that are committed by Black men, we will arrive at a space where we have the language to address those issues where Black men and Black boys are put in those situations.
So connected back to Black music, hip hop, a Black Music Month, and we can what does the culture demand of us today, and is there any hope that because okay, so I'm an official elder now. I'm an OG elder in the community. So what I'm thinking about is I'm hell. I gotta stand by and be the consult to the next generation.
Right.
So what I'm trying to understand is how do we build the spaces that we need in order for there be a lot more room in the music? That's what I'm hearing you say. Because it's not one thing. We're not trying to get rid of anything, but we're also trying to expand what is popular. I think that's what I heard you say. Maybe you
Well,
didn't say that.
I think, for everyone listening, you start right at home and in your own community, and with your own brothers sometimes, with your own fathers sometimes, with your own friends sometimes. And you can be the voice that pushes back. You can be the voice that says, yeah, I think that's bullshit. You can be the voice that does that, right? But even if you're not someone who volunteers or mentors young people, you can also apply that to every interaction you have with younger Black men and Black boys. You
Mm-hmm.
can advise them, you can influence them. Brother Kilpatrick, there are a lot of people younger than you who you will influence, and you have the power of influence over them. And you have to take every opportunity to say, hey, the stakes are really high for us around some of these gender issues. And we are not going to find, discover, or steal or achieve liberation without rooting out patriarchy, misogyny, and these issues from our community by Black men. This is not a women's issue, to be honest with you. Women are subject to the structures of this, but it's more of an issue for us to get ourselves together and to focus and think and work and mentor and teach, and yes, push back sometimes, because those pushbacks have a lot more impact than you might think.
I love that you're uplifting the voices and the experiences and the trauma, quite frankly, of what Black women as Black men uplifting those experiences. I think that's very powerful, and I hope that the brothers are listening and they rethink some of the moves that we're making because we get caught up sometimes. So
Well, it's been a long journey for me, brother.
go ahead.
It's been a long journey for me, right? Like I didn't arrive here like this. I had to learn some things, learn from the women in my family, learn from my wife, learn from experiences. And I hope that, if there's one thing, right? If there's one thing, be in a position and be in a stance where you're always trying to learn, not just from your mistakes, but from everything.
Right.
And if you're open to that, then your mind and your spirit can be open to entering into the world in a way where you're not enacting violence upon anybody, where you're encouraging men to understand the limitations of patriarchy, and where you're challenging all the men in your life to think a little bit differently about where and how they enter into discourses with women and experiences and exchanges with women.
So let's take it back to the music and hip hop and how all of this connects, because I think the hip hop, my boy, I got a lot of folks who, and even as part of this show, we'll be talking a little bit about this, who think hip hop gets a bad rap. They feel that we can't just put hip hop as the answer and the solution to all of these things that you just described, right? Because all of the things that you said show up in hip hop, they also show up societally, right? So let's connect the dots and what can we do in the name of the culture, in the name of the music, to create the community that we want, that love and support Black women in the culture.
So I think the first step in that is being creative and critical about who you're listening to and who you're supporting. So I support Rhapsody. I think Rhapsody is a great artist, and I follow her and listen to her music, write about her when I can. I think she's just a fantastic artist. Now, again, just a warning to everyone: if you've never listened to Rhapsody, Rhapsody is not a sex positive rapper. She's not talking about her sexuality all the time. Like, she's talking about other things. She's very gifted, an excellent lyricist. And so I think it's about finding the things that you like that add on and enter into the culture in constructive ways. And I'm not saying that Ice Spice and Megan Thee Stallion and Nicki Minaj and Cardi B and all those women are not positive. I'm just saying that you have to find representations in the culture that I think expand the spectrum of representations that are present and support those. And I feel like that is important. I mean, I support Lauryn Hill every opportunity that I get. Every show that me and my wife can go to, we go to, even if we have to wait 3 hours to go see it, because she's one of the greatest lyricists to ever pick up a microphone in the culture, man, woman, or dog, right? Like, she's just one of the best, and we should continue to support her. And again, I don't want to get into the whole thing about production and who made the music. Well, I'm just about her lyricism, the words that she wrote, right? And so I think you identify what resonates with you and you support that, and you do it intentionally in the sense that you want to support artists and aspects of the culture that flesh out the range of representations that are available to us in the marketplace.
Quickly, I don't know if this is quickly because I got another call going, but here's a piece. What about Drake and Kendrick and J.
Oh man,
Cole?
this is my last piece. I gotta go too, bro. This is my last piece. So look, Kendrick won whatever that was.
Right.
Kendrick won that, right?
Right.
And also, I want to be transparent here. So I'm not really a typical Drake fan anyway. I'm not a Drake fan, right? I actually had to spend a lot of time just trying not to hate on Drake.
Right.
For reasons, though, Brother Kilpatrick, for reasons that were only fully clear, transparent, and well articulated to me in this battle,
right,
through Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
And I'll say a couple things here. One, I feel like he won the battle on its own terms.
Right.
Kendrick Lamar won the battle on its own terms, in terms of timing of release, in terms of lyrics, in terms of production, in terms of social media response. He won the battle on his own terms, but he also changed what the terms of what a hip hop battle could be.
Right.
Because Kendrick addressed the idea that not only do I not like this guy, not only is this guy whack, not only is he a colonizer, but I don't even like the idea of this kind of artist in the culture.
Okay.
Right? And Not Like Us is gonna go down as a classic. It's a classic song, period. Classic battle song. It's classic on every level, right? But here's what I'll say, and I'll be quiet as well. We haven't talked enough about J. Cole.
Oh.
And kudos to J. Cole for seeing the terrain and the viciousness of this battle before it fully unfolded and divesting himself from it. Like, I don't even want to be a part of it.
But they called him out. They was like, you ain't real. He
got so much flack for it, but it's such a genius move. And here's the thing. Here's where J. Cole beats Kendrick and Drake put together. J. Cole presides over the Dreamville label, which is, for me and for my money, one of the best labels in culture, popular, hip hop or otherwise right now. Ari Lennox, Jid, Earth Gang, Boss, J. Cole himself, and other artists. Neither one of those guys have ushered in as much good music across as many different artists as J. Cole has. And so Kendrick won the battle. We don't acknowledge J. Cole for his smartness and intelligence in doing what he did. And I'm really happy that Kate articulated for so many of us why we're not like Drake fan.
Amen. All right, Dr. James Peterson, WRD Radio, Philadelphia. When can they hear you?
Oh, Monday through Thursdays, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's online at wrdradio.com, or there's a Facebook feed. If you go to Facebook, just put in WRD. I'm live and on camera, 4 to 7 p.m. Mondays through Thursdays.
Love it, man. Let's check him out. Support the brother, and congratulations on your 50th celebration at Duke University.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Omega Zeta chapter of Omega Psi Phi celebrated 50 years at Duke this year. Brother Kilpatrick, you got to come on my show. Okay, you got to come on my show now.
We're coming. Right. We got a lot to do. All right, Brother James, Dr. James Peterson in the house. Always a pleasure, brother. Mm-hmm. And we did something that I didn't expect us to do, but I'm glad we did. Okay? Right. I'm glad we did.
Important. Me too.
George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation.